All right, so today we're going to deep dive into something that's, got everybody talking, Lil Durk's arrest. And to do that, we're going to go through this interview from Charleston White.
Okay.
Charleston White, as you may or may not know, is this, former gang member turned really outspoken internet personality and community activist type figure. And what he has to say about Lil Durk's arrest is pretty interesting. So first, I guess just to kind of recap what happened. Lil Durk was arrested. He booked 2 flights, one to Italy and one to Switzerland. And before he could get out of the country, the U.S. Marshals apprehended him in Fort Lauderdale.
And this is after he was receiving a key to the city of Chicago, going to rehab. He was sort of, really trying to rebrand himself and kind of separate himself from the image of violence that was associated with the Chicago drill music scene.
Right. So it's a pretty big, turn of events. And Charleston White has some interesting thoughts on what this all means. So first of all, White kind of lays out the argument that this is all part of a bigger problem. And, he's coming from that same world. He knows all about it. He even claims that...
he says he killed drill rap.
He killed drill rap.
Yeah.
So his argument is that he's been so outspoken against this, gangster lifestyle and, telling people to snitch, that it forced the industry to kind of reckon with its dark side. Yeah,
it's interesting because you can't say, he single-handedly did it, but you can't deny the impact that his voice has had. And he's had a massive online platform. Mm-hmm. He's not afraid to name names and call people out.
Yeah, he seems to thrive on that kind of controversy.
Yeah, for sure.
And he doesn't hold back at all. Another thing he says that's really interesting is that, sending young black men to prison can actually be a path to redemption.
Yeah.
He says that, his time in jail actually gave him, structure and discipline that, he never had growing up in his community.
Which is interesting because you think about all the, the systemic issues that are leading to mass incarceration, but his own personal experience and his perspective on it, is that there is potential for rehabilitation and transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk about that more later in the episode. One kind of interesting thing he brought up was the death of King Von. King Von was another prominent figure in the Chicago drill scene, close with Lil Durk. And his death sparked a lot of, online speculation about revenge and, people saying Lil Durk, needs to retaliate. But Charleston White says those people on the keyboard don't have any real power. He says this all comes down to, the desire for revenge that's ingrained in the code of the streets.
It's eye for an eye.
Yeah.
Money and fame can't erase that.
Right. And he claims that's, part of what, led to Lil Durk's downfall. All of his efforts at reform were overshadowed by this lingering thirst for revenge.
That's interesting.
And he even brought up that Lil Durk's father had just been released from prison. And he said, he could see a positive change in Lil Durk's behavior after that. Maybe he had some structure and guidance from his father.
It begs the question, what is the role of family in this?
Yeah.
How much does having that mentor or that guidance figure in your life affect your ability to break free from these cycles of violence?
Right. And so one other thing White said was that this arrest could be a turning point for hip hop. Maybe this is the catalyst for, moving away from this glorifying violence thing. It could be a wake up call for the industry that's profited from these street narratives for so long.
Right. Because, we saw that with gangster rap in the 90s with Tupac and Biggie.
Yeah.
Maybe there are these cycles in popular culture where trends rise and fall.
Yeah.
And maybe the industry learned from those past mistakes and is more cautious about, overtly promoting violence.
White says they're still complicit.
Oh,
even if it's more subtle now, they're still profiting from these narratives.
And especially labels like OTF.
Right. And OTF is Lil Durk's own label.
Yeah.
So he's saying they knowingly sign and promote artists who are involved in criminal activity, all for the sake of profit.
Right. It all comes back to the money.
And he even suggests that maybe Lil Durk's attempts at, rebranding himself and trying to distance himself from the violence was partly driven by the industry's changing priorities.
Oh, wow.
Maybe they were pushing him to clean up his image so that he could stay relevant.
To sell more records?
Yeah. He also talks about that, wild rumor that went around online about him being shot. And it was completely false.
Right.
But the speed at which that misinformation spread and the way some people reacted to it, it really reveals this dark side of internet culture.
And it speaks volumes about White's polarizing personality, right? He attracts all this attention, both good and bad.
Yeah, he actually called it a false celebration, like people were celebrating his supposed death.
Which is a little disturbing when you think about it.
Yeah, it's a morbid fascination with violence. But White doesn't even flinch.
No, he uses it.
He thrives on controversy. He uses it to amplify his message.
Yeah, he knows how to turn these situations into opportunities for learning and, you know, use them to talk about the bigger problems.
Yeah, you love him or hate him, you can't deny he's authentic.
Yeah, he's not holding back.
And he's definitely making people think.
For sure.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to dive even deeper into Charleston White's perspective and, you know, try to unpack all of these complex issues. But before we get into that, just take a moment and reflect on what you've heard so far, what's resonating with you, what's got you thinking, because what White shares next might completely change how you see this case and, you know, the whole hip-hop industry for that matter. So stay tuned.
I think what's really impactful is that Charleston White owns up to, you know, his crimes. He says he and his crew actually took a life.
Yeah, and he says that weighs on him.
Yeah, and that's why he feels this, you know, this urge to work with these young people, to steer them away from that life.
Trying to make amends. He even compares his journey to Lil Durk's. Like maybe Lil Durk was searching for that same redemption.
Right, because even within all that violence, you know, you can still have that desire for something better.
Yeah, but he says it's so hard to break free from that pull of the streets.
Especially when you're surrounded by those influences.
Yeah, and he calls out the music industry for profiting off of that.
Oh yeah, he's not afraid to point fingers.
Especially with King Von. He says people were celebrating King Von knowing his history of violence.
But then they condemn Charleston White for calling out that violence.
Yeah, it's a double standard.
It is.
And he brings up that whole thing with the false shooting rumor. The way some people reacted to that.
Yeah, it just shows you how desensitized we've become to violence.
Yeah, he called it a false celebration.
Yep.
And he even says he enjoyed the attention.
He thrives on that controversy.
Yeah, but you can tell it hurts him too. Especially when it's coming from people in his own community.
Yeah, there's a vulnerability there.
So let's go back to that whole Kill Jarrell rap claim. He goes into more detail about that. He says, you know, his willingness to challenge the status quo, to speak out against the glorification of violence, that's what forced the industry to change.
Yeah, he's not afraid to be the bad guy.
He says it's like what happened with gangster rap in the 90s.
With Tupac and Biggie.
Yeah, like maybe the industry learned from its mistakes.
And they're being more careful about promoting violence.
But he says they're still complicit.
Oh, yeah.
Especially labels like OTF. He claims they knowingly sign and promote artists with criminal backgrounds.
All for the money.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because he even suggests that maybe Lil Durk's attempts to rebrand himself were partly driven by the industry's changing priorities.
Yeah, like maybe they were pushing him to clean up his image.
To stay marketable.
Yeah. And he also criticizes the way the media covers these stories. He says they focus on the sensationalism.
The violence, the drama.
Yeah, instead of the real issues. He also brought up the charges against him from that incident with his dog. He says it's all politically motivated to silence him.
Right, because he's a threat to the status quo.
And he's not backing down.
No, he sees himself as a truth teller.
And love him or hate him, he's got a point.
Yeah, he's making us think.
So get ready for this. Charleston White believes Lil Durk might actually be better off in prison.
Ooh.
He says the structure and discipline could be what Lil Durk needs to turn his life around.
That's a bold statement.
Yeah, but he's speaking from experience.
Right. He says prison saved him.
Yeah, and he contrasts Lil Durk's situation with Chief Keef. He says Chief Keef went to therapy, found healthier ways to deal with his trauma.
Yeah.
But Lil Durk surrounded himself with the wrong people.
And clung to that street lifestyle.
Yeah, and he says sometimes prison can be the wake-up call.
The tough love.
Yeah, he even shares a story about his own brother who served 31 years for murder. He says he confronted his brother about his lack of remorse.
Wow.
Urged him to find empathy for the victim's family.
That's powerful.
Yeah, and he also talked about the upcoming presidential election. He's calling for a boycott. Yeah, he says neither party represents Black communities.
So he's disillusioned with the whole system.
Yeah, he thinks change has to come from within.
From the ground up.
And he also shared that he's reconciled with Woody.
Oh, wow. After all of that.
Yeah, it seems like they've put their differences aside.
So there's hope for forgiveness?
Yeah. But then he got really vulnerable. He talked about how all the hate and the death threats have taken a toll.
Yeah, you could hear the pain in his voice.
He even questioned why he keeps putting himself out there.
It's got to be exhausting.
Yeah, but then he was like, I won't be silenced.
He's a fighter.
Yeah, he's not giving up.
And, you know, love him or hate him.
Yeah.
He's starting a conversation.
Yeah, and that's what's important.
For sure.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, we're left with a lot to think about. Can Lil Durk find redemption behind bars? Can the music industry change? And can Charleston White keep fighting the good fight? We'll keep exploring these questions as we go deeper into White's perspective, so stay tuned. You know, it's crazy how Charleston White uses humor to kind of like deflect all the hate he gets.
Yeah.
He jokes about those rumors, his critics.
Even his own past.
It's like he's taking away their power by not taking them too seriously.
He's really good at using satire and sarcasm, too.
Yeah.
To expose how weak their arguments are.
It's like he's trying to shake people awake, you know? Make them question everything.
Yeah, and he does it with this authenticity you just can't fake.
Right. It's clear he's speaking from experience.
And he really understands those complexities of street life.
Yeah, and that's what makes this whole deep dive so valuable.
Absolutely.
We're not just talking about Lil Durk. We're talking about the bigger picture.
The systems that keep this cycle of violence going.
The music industry, the media, the justice system.
Even our own biases.
We're forced to confront some uncomfortable truths.
And ask some tough questions.
But Charleston White gives me hope.
Me too.
He shows us that even in the darkest times.
There's always a chance for change.
For redemption.
For a better future.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm feeling this sense of urgency, but also possibility. Lil Durk's arrest is a wake-up call. It's time to look at our own role in these systems.
And support those fighting for change.
Fight for justice and reform.
And never give up on redemption.
Maybe if we're open to listening and learning, we can break free from this cycle of violence and create a world where stories like Lil Durk's are the exception, not the rule.
That's the goal.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, peace.